Today we have in our studio the director of Universal Rastafarian Movement Incorporated, Empress Madupe. Welcome to our studio.
Thank you, Owen.
Okay.
Glad to be here.
And today we're going to look at upcoming events for Black History Month. You know, several years we've been looking at ways in terms of how we can help bring back memories of this Black History Month. And in further ado, we'd just like to you to explain how this went about in terms of who were the person in the fold in terms of help creating Black History Month.
Well, Black History Month is really traditionally an African-American celebration, which began with African scholar called Carter G. Woodson. In the early 20s, he was looking at, you know, usually in the United States, you have a month in which they're celebrating American heritage. And then during that month, Carter G. Woodson noted that Black people who had contributed so much to the development of the United States history in the Americas, that none of these prominent Black people were noted. So he started doing events around raising awareness about our history, who we are, that we had a legacy of a history prior to slavery. So coming forward now to today in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the Universal Rastafarian Movement began a tradition of showing films, and of course with the sponsorship of IKTV, showing a lot of Black conscious films that would raise awareness of the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, of different groups of people throughout the world, what they've done, their history as Africans around the world. So we will be featuring documentaries on Marcus Garvey, who was a prominent Black Power leader in the United States and the Caribbean. We have a film on Fidel Castro. We have a film on Walter Rodney. Well,
I'm glad you mentioned that because there are several films that I've heard about, and I don't know if you want to expand on some of the films that, especially in the light of the Garifuna journey. Can you shed some light on that?
Oh, very good. I'm glad you mentioned that one first. The Garifuna journey, and I'm pretty sure you, as this is the home of the Garifuna people, or the Kalinagos, I would hope that that would be the first film that you show. This is a documentary that was done by Andrea Leland, who in collaboration with the Garifuna Heritage Foundation here, did a film looking at, it's basically an oral history of the Garifuna people, starting in Belize and sort of tracing it with some of the folks here, also the connection. So it basically tells a story of the Garifuna people and their connections together as a people. It's told in the history of the people. That's the first film.
I know a lot of people in terms of Marcus Garvey. He's a prominent person, especially around the region and the world. In terms of that inset of the movie clippings, what are some of the things that you see came out of that movie in terms of where you can help generate for our viewers who are not seeing it as yet, but what can your description give them a light of sense of feeling of that?
Look for Me in the Whirlwind. It was a PBS documentary done. It really looks at the life of this charismatic leader known as Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey, as you may or may not know, in the early 20th century was the founder of a Black Power movement that claimed over 4 million members. And that was not just in the United States, but throughout the diaspora. And there was even a UNIA. It was called the Universal Negro Improvement Association. The UNIA became one of the largest membership organization comprising of Black people from all over the world. So Look for Me in the Whirlwind speaks of Garvey as a leader, those who follow him, those who believe in him, and the legacy of his work. Because today Garvey is known as the father of Pan-Africanism, as the father of Black nationalism. And you may see everywhere around the world, you'll see the flag, the red, black, and green flag, which is Garvey's flag. By the way, Garvey started the first political party in Jamaica, and that was the flag, the Black nationalist flag. Okay, the red represents the blood of the people, the black is the people, and the green represents the land. Red, black, and green. That's our Black Power flag.
Okay, I'm just gonna put you on the spot. Viewers may see you as, you know, we talk about Black History Month, the color of your skin. In terms of, they might say, but you're not black, why are you creating or helping to put Black history on the in the month coming up?
Well, for viewers to really look at my skin pigmentation and to determine that I am not a woman of African descent would be really erroneous on their part, I would think, because one can only look at my phenotype and see the characteristics and know that I'm of African descent. Now, because my pigmentation is of a fairer complexion, my response to is go to Africa and you will see, particularly in Ethiopia, you will find a diversity of humans. We as African people, we are like a field of flowers. We have many different skin pigmentation, many different phenotypes, and you will find that throughout the world, not just on the continent of Africa, but you will find Africans in India, you will find Africans in China, you will find Africans in Europe, you will find, and I'm speaking of ancient indigenous Africans that still to this day exist. So Africa is the mother of humanity. So for someone to look at one's pigmentation and determine, well, you're not black enough or you're not white enough to be considered European. I'm not concerned about skin complexion. I'm concerned about one's humanity. Africa is the mother of humanity. What we hope during Black History Month to teach younger people who are not aware of the roots of African history, who seem to think that our story began with slavery, our hope is to teach them, no, that Africa has a much richer history than what we were traditionally taught about Africa, that we have more positive images of Africa that we can portray and teach our youth. It's a matter of knowing one's history. And as Marcus Garvey used to say, a people without the knowledge of their past history is like a tree without its roots. And so things like Black history, events like Black history, where one can take the time to have discussions around our origin. We recently had a reparations conference here. There were presenters, there were people in the audience that spoke about part of the reparations process is the recovery and the recollections, our collective memory and the restoration of our African traditions and culture. And part of them is learning who we are.
To put in a shed of light, you have journeyed to Ethiopia. Have you been to Ethiopia?
Yes, I was visiting researcher at Addis Ababa University in 1992. And I worked with the university department, the history department in the university. I had the opportunity to travel to Aksum and Ethiopia because Aksum in the northern section and the Tigray province is one of the oldest home to the ancient relics that shows you the antiquity of African civilization in Ethiopia.
That's very interesting because if we can shed some light in terms of persons sometimes deem Ethiopia as one of the poorest nations, but in some of the infrastructures or daily lives, how do you encompass that in terms to the Caribbean?
Okay, well, the world perception about Ethiopia, or our perception of Ethiopia and the continent of Africa, of poverty is one that's done by design. And it would take an entire conversation, much more time than you have right now, that I could elaborate to the audience as to why our perception of Africans and Africa being poor. As I said before, the continent is one of the wealthiest continents in the world. You may not be aware of it, but right now there are constant wars and conflicts over the mineral wealth of Africa, the fossil fuel, you name it, land grabbing, and so on. So what you're seeing in Africa, the poverty that is portrayed in the media, is a result of the impact of the colonization of the continent of Africa, subsequent occupation by foreign powers, and the rape of the continent by not only its human resources, but its natural and mineral resources. So what you do see, yes, there are places where there's dire poverty in Africa, but it's not because the continent doesn't have the wealth or the land to sustain the people. It's who the wealth and the resources whose hands
Sad.
it's on. And the policies, the foreign policies that are made by powerful nations like the United States, Great Britain, France, and so on, they certainly do impact. And now China, it certainly does impact on the lives of Africans.
You saying that, is it that the country, is it just left on its own, even though it have these policies and so in Ethiopia, it's still being overlooked at from the...
Are you speaking about Ethiopia specifically?
Yes, yeah.
Because Ethiopia has one of the fastest growing economies in Africa right now. You still have an image, again, I'm saying that it's the media. You have to travel to Ethiopia. Ethiopia, Addis Ababa is one of the most modern cities in the world right now. I mean, in Africa, if you look. You can go to Senegal and go to Dakar. You'll be shocked. Go to Egypt. You know, you go to Zimbabwe, go to South Africa. You have to travel the continent in order to get your mind out of these visions of Africa where there are starving people without clothing and so on. You have cosmopolitan, metropolitan areas in Africa that are thriving. Go to Nigeria, okay, that you will see the wealth that is in Africa. And there are homes, like by comparison to a small island like St. Vincent, a small nation like St. Vincent, you know, there are places in Africa that would make the whole Caribbean pale.
Okay. Do you think today our schools are ready in terms of the curriculum that's being given around the region in terms of our history? Because, you know, history sometimes is a repeat for itself. But have any thought on how the history in terms of Marcus Garvey, even the wider world, especially like Ethiopia, where most of our people still have this kind of thought about these other countries? Would you like to see there's a curriculum based on history? Because we do history in school, but I don't think we go to the full fundamental part of it.
Well, of course, as an educator and as a proponent of African liberation and African mindset, I would definitely say that the Caribbean itself, and I have seen some progress in terms of the community college, I see is really doing things to help enrich the curriculum by some of the teachers are promoting, have their students doing research and interest, not only in Africa, but in the Rastafari community specifically. So in terms of the primary and secondary school level, yes, I would like to see a curriculum in which African and indigenous cultures are taught, and not just from the perspective of how the European educators are employing the influence on our curriculum, but from the perspective of the indigenous peoples themselves that we're studying, from the perspective of African scholars and Asian scholars and indigenous scholars of the Americas.
Okay, we going back to Black History Month. What's some of the activities that the movement planned for the upcoming event?
Okay, well, our primary activities right now we focusing on is using the media, as I said, with those series of films to raise awareness as to. I think we might want to go over that list of films, because I would like your audience to really get a sense, and maybe, I wouldn't want to say entice them, but to really give them a sense of what kind of films that they should expect to see and what it's about, you know?
Yeah, because we have like the agronomists.
The Agronomist, that's one close to my heart. It's a very powerful documentary. Have you know the filmmaker Jonathan Demme?
Yeah.
Right, Jonathan Demme met Mr. Jean Dominique, who is in Haiti, by the way. He's of a very well-to-do family, but Jean Dominique is a people's man. He was an advocate of the poor, and Jean Dominique had the only free radio station in Haiti, and he used that radio station to help raise awareness and to bring about change in Haiti. So of course he was always at odds with the government. So this is a story about his life, tracking him down, his work, his advocacy, the challenges that he met. And although he was trained as an agronomist, he turned out to be a people's man, fighting for the people's man.
Can you shed a little bit of light on the Prodigal Son? Because, you know, some of these are the thoughts that person spoke of.
Prodigal Son is a documentary of a young man who was born in Cape Town, South Africa, but he traces the origin of his grandparent who had come from Barbados in the late 1800s and settled in Cape Town, South Africa. So now what he does a reverse journey. He leaves Cape Town and now traces his roots back to Barbados, and even made a little trip over to St. Vincent in the documentary also. It's very interesting. You might see some familiar faces of folks who are from here and scenes in Barbados and St. Vincent that you're familiar with. It brings Africa, an African connection to a local connection, a Caribbean connection.
Okay, before we wrap up, let's talk about this last one, Pass It On.
Passing It On, okay. Passing It On is another powerful documentary which looks at the life of Doruba Ben Wahad, who was a political prisoner. He was a Black Panther in prison for over 20-something years. And this chronicles his struggle in prison, trying to prove that he was innocent. And the people who went out and looked at his case and proved him innocent and helped him get out of jail. And he's now living in Africa and Tanzania as a freed man.
Okay. So as we wrap up this interview, any important thing you would like to leave with the audience in terms of the Black History Month being created and how successful it was and how it been going in terms of?
Well, for me, Black History Month is every day. I am a woman of African descent, and I celebrate my Blackness, my Africanness every day. And I think that we don't need to wait, although that this is the month that's been given to us, but we do not need to wait for a Black History Month to learn about our story. You have his story and you have our story. And I urge our people, especially the young people in the schools, learn to do research, learn about who you are. Our story began prior to the enslavement of African people. Prior to the slave trade, we had great civilizations which influenced the civilizations in Asia as well as in Europe and in the Americas. You find all the connections. Do your homework. You'll see that Africa is the mother and father of humanity. Take pride in being of African descent. The more you learn about yourself, the more you realize the great contributions we have made to humanity and the great potential that you have in yourself to contribute not only to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but to the rest of the world. Vincentian youth have a lot to do. I finally would say that knowing your history also links to knowing your environment. Learn how to take care of your environment and how to protect it and your responsibilities so that not only you're enjoying it today, but think about those to come in future generations.
Okay, and on behalf of IKTV and our staff, I just want to thank you for coming to share and enlighten us. Myself, I'm so glad for this opportunity to have the interview with you, and I've learned so much. I think that now I really want to join the Rastafari movement, you know. And once again, I just want to thank you, Empress Madupi.
I really appreciate that. I do hope you'll have an opportunity. You don't have to join the Rastafari movement to do something positive with us. We embrace everyone, including non-Rastas. So as long as it's for the benefit of the people, we look forward to working with you on that. All right, thank you for having me.
You have been looking at a program on IKTV on which we develop on the Black History Month and other social issues surrounding the Black history.